You're listening to On the Path with Charlie Keil, Zach Rudis, and John Grusauskas.
Very nice, John. I like that intro. Now, time is of the essence. Equality, Eden, eternity. 4 E's. Eden, eternity, equality, essence. I come back to that often in my thinking, often in my talking, often in my life, that those 4 E's, Eden, eternity, equality, essence, they're like liberty, fraternity, equality. They're a set of...
It's an ethos.
Yeah, an atmosphere. They interpenetrate with each other, Eden and eternity. And it's like a book title. It's like, a sum up of a lot of important things. And then on the 12-8 path, and there are many paths in this world, 12-8 is just one of them. Because this worldview, or Weltanschauung, world outlook, turns and revolutes on a radical, spelled R-A-D-I-C-L-E, rooted, like radicals coming off the root, main taproot, or coming off the stem. It's a technical botanical term, radicals, or radical, not C-A-L, which is the inflammatory Trump word for us or those alternative Antifa others.
I suppose that the etymology on that is related, though. They're almost surely from the same.
The rad part is an atom with an atom. You know, it's a very important.
On the fringes, sort of.
But the ickle is like, the little rootlets, the radicals. That's the kind of radical I'm always talking about, or almost always, a radical rooted definition of our species being. Homo ludens collaborans, facing and enjoying what Harvey Jackins insisted on calling benign reality. And in between having this little poem that I thought we'd start out with, or some part of it, I went and looked up Harvey Jackins and what it is that he had left behind. I don't know when he died, some years ago. He started a movement called reevaluation counseling. And Angie and I were part of that movement. Angie got it started with a couple of friends in Buffalo. For 10 years, I did co-counseling with Harvey Jackins as the guru who had laid down the rules about benign reality. And then he wrote a second book called Total Benign Reality because he wasn't getting it across to his satisfaction. And I see those two terms, the Homo ludens collaborans, the Latin for our species being, humorous, playful, collaborating, and Harvey's notion of benign reality behind all this crud and TIFOS and the fog of war, the fog of capitalism, the fog of all these different systems that loose in the world that are filling up space, filling up time, filling up the atmosphere, taking up the energy. When you walk into any room, you're going to come across fake news of all different kinds and all kinds of layers. And it's into that kind of fog, or typhos, as the ancient Greeks called it, or the currency, the common misunderstandings that we all labor under. It's into that music seems to me like the lotion, the cure, the solution, the model of how things might be if 3 musicians got together and made this music. Any other 3 musicians could do it, or here's a duo, or here's a solo. What you do on a Sunday night is an amazing synthesis of a whole lot of good musicking that's gone on for many, many years before you, and you're just there pulling it all together in that one evening, one moment, one time, and it works well enough that you take home a pretty good paycheck. I think that's the only thing that I've had to add to life, or to the world that I came into, is this notion that music is somehow what holds religion and politics together. I got that idea from Malcolm X, that you need both a religious movement of some kind and a political movement, and that they need to be separate, kind of equal, and yet intermeshed if you really want to create profound social change. And I think that's why we're gathered around this table, is to figure out what is that musical element that kind of holds together a worldview, a religion, and a politics. And how are all those things co-evolving these days in a very critical situation? I mean, it's no accident that we're starting to do this in 2020, September, haven't got it on my watch, September 28th? Is that what's today?
Let's check. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Monday, September 28th.
Yeah, and so on that note, I'd be happy to talk to you guys any way you want to talk about some of these issues of benign reality, music, religion, politics.
Well, I wanted
what is
to.
our strategy for our situation?
I wanted to come back to the beginning of because we started with a stanza of your poem,
Mm-hmm.
and you talked about these E's, the equality, Eden, eternity, ease. And when you're talking about Eden, you're talking about music as a sort of salve or a glue or a balm or a cure. What does your Eden look like? Like when you walk down Main Street,
Right.
Millerton, which is where we are, Millerton, New York. What does that musical Eden look like? How does it manifest? Is it children beating on objects in a rhythmic manner? Is it
Yep.
Is it a path band?
Yep. It's all those things. And I think that's why the Jackins notion that there's all this fog, tifos, gook, as he calls it, gobbledygook, the gray blanket, he's got hundreds of different ways of expressing this atmosphere that we're in, that capitalism and militarism and all the isms have generated, this fog that we work through. It's there in the streets of Millerton. It's there wherever we go. And at the same time, this notion of a benign reality behind that is behind every building in Millerton, or behind every person you meet in the street, is that possible ray of sunshine, that possible moment of conversation that could just change your life, that each person carries within them an accumulated couple of billion years of evolving life on this planet, summed up in their person, in their life experience. So Millerton, Lakeville, Salisbury, they all have different personalities in my mind. I'm a Lakeville guy, and so I distrust Salisbury. I'm worried that this is even more terminally quaint than Lakeville. And Lakeville and Salisbury compared to Millerton, where there's a whole variety of people that you're just not going to meet in Lakeville or Salisbury.
2 miles that way.
Yeah, 2 miles over the border. Somehow this is New York. And Lakeville and Salisbury are the last gasp of the most Connecticut part of Connecticut, if you think about it that way. There's a wonderful joke about Connecticut. Speaking of the children knocking on things. That in Connecticut, the people are so cold fish, so Yankee, so,
Protestant roots.
Yeah, Protestant and pious and silent and shut down in some basic ways, but Puritanism and
Calvinists.
Connecticut is where those folks are at their worst. And so they have to send their children into Hartford to be raised by Italian and Jewish families.
To warm up a little bit.
That's how Connecticut, solves its problem, is by finding warm, familial, open-ended Italian Americans and Jewish Americans who can at least get their kids through those first few years of life and maybe help them become all they can become. Because if they were left in Connecticut, the terminal quaintness might get them early.
How deep are your roots in Connecticut?
Oh, pretty deep. My mom was born in Lakeville, that big old Holly mansion. And she was off to to a prep school when she was 13 or 14, something like that, because she got a full scholarship to be kind of a piano player and a lively participant in Abbott Academy. And so I have this sense of her roots right there in Lakeville. And then my dad's roots are off in Germany. His parents came from Germany, from Frankenbesch. They were both from the same small town. They were both from farming families. And my grandmother, who was a big influence on me, was from a family that still believed in the spirits in trees. And she came to America confidently, ready to marry my grandfather, Charlie Keil, because he would drive a horse and wagon through the woods without fear. He wasn't afraid of the spirits in trees. My grandma tells me this when I'm out, weeding in the garden, and she's sitting there in a chair and waiting for some peppers and tomatoes to come her way to make some food with. And she just started talking to me about what life was like back in Frankenbesch, Germany. And I later in life, when I was working with Native Americans who are very full of, the idea of the spirit in trees, the spirit in animals, the different taboos and totems and so on that they still carried among the Seneca and the Onondaga. And I was able to pipe up and say, I'm not so far from that. My grandmother knew about the spirits in trees and knew that she was going to go to the New World with somebody who was skeptical about that and not afraid of the spirit world. So we're all not so far removed from that same sort of spirituality. And everybody walking the streets of Millerton, to get back to your question of how do I see a place like where we are.
That Eden.
Yeah, it's got an Edenic quality. It's got a pagan quality to it. We've got trees with us still. The sun rises every day like it did 1,000 years ago or 20,000 years ago. There are these benign realities behind all the fog of war and fog of militarism, fog of capitalism, fog of advertising constantly. And you can't look at YouTube anymore without having advertisements pop up in the middle of a musical performance. Have you noticed that? That happened a few months ago, I think. You used to be able to look at things all the way through. But if it's got any kind of number of hits, there's now advertising just pops in, and you have to cancel it out. I mean, this is that kind of fog or typhos or what the ancient dogs called the currency, defacing the currency. We're constantly being faced by a currency or current events, current crapola that fogs up your vision of Millerton or of Lakeville or of Salisbury or of any local community that has this potential to be Edenic, but isn't that Edenic today because we got so much technology, false values, domination values, so many things in the way of just being real and being close. And 6 feet feels close. And in the midst of the COVID world, we can be as close as we are at this table and be looking for, seeking, in search of the primitive, the prime, the Edenic. The one you left out of the 4 E's was essence. The essence of the situation, or the essence of what's Johnny's essence?
Are those not 5 E's then?
Well, E's, he calls them the 4 E's, E-A-S-E.
Oh, I thought E's, E-A-S-E was one of the...
Yeah, it's essence, equality.
Make it 5 E's. I'll go for 5.
5?
Essence, equality, Eden, eternity. The 4 E's, E-A-S-E, which with as a lowercase e at the end. Charlie's been giving me his poems and writings for years and decades, so I'm kind of used to his style of is it punetry? Puns? And
punditry?
Punditry? I know, yeah, that's trying not to be a pundit.
No.
Maybe we'll post a picture of this so people can see when they watch the video, but he's got all sorts of different sized fonts, and the E's is capital E-A-S, lowercase e. What's that about, Chuck?
Well, I'm trying to, in my lowercase, in the 8-point case, it's all on the 12-8 path, I put the poem itself in 12 point, and the intro material or whatever got me there when I woke up in the morning and put the date and time at the top corner. I'm always thinking of this as not slam poetry, not call and response church, sermon poetry. This is poetry on the page. People are going to look at it on the page, and I want to get as much message, as much meaning, as much mystery and ambiguity too. Why did he put that? Just the question you asked. Why did you put that in lowercase, Chuck? Why is that little e over there? I want people to kind of enter into that page and think about it and have some fun. Every pun, every rhyme matchup is a little bit of a chuckle or a little bit of Chuck trying to bring you in.
I'd read into your formatting of ease as capital EAS, lowercase e, with the idea that ease, like you're presenting a big idea, but it's ease. So at the end of the word,
right,
we can like take a breath and ratchet it down and go to lowercase ease.
Wow. See, I never thought of that.
So that's being an English major.
That's what I want to happen, is that a Zach or a Johnny G will say, well, that could mean,
What was your initial intention of the meaning of capital EAS, lowercase e?
To sum up that decline. I'm making each word smaller.
I see that. Essence.
So it's kind of like, this is as tight as I can get it. Eden, eternity, equality, essence, for ease. Are you still paying attention? Are you in there with me?
I
think that's what I was intending. But it can have Zach's interpretation or yours. And I think a poem is supposed to do that. It's supposed to have a pretty clear intent. When you look at the whole thing or look at the title, you get the intention of it. And then it's intention. It's needs to be, a little tense between me and the reader. You've got more references because of all the years that you've been watching me flounder around with this and that. And Zach doesn't have quite as many of those common references. My daughter keeps telling me every time I get her on the phone, Dad, you gotta, I understand most of this poem, but what about all those other people? I said, well, they'll get it after a while. You got it after a while. And if there's plenty of poems and I keep pumping them out over the time, somebody who reads any more than 15 of them will say, oh, he's always working those parentheses. Those are the arms of love and embracing and containing and nurturing. And he got that from that crazy guy over in Nigeria, Gypsy full stop, sun and moon, parentheses. You see parentheses on my page of poems? That's sun and moon. Got it from that megalomaniac in Nigeria.
I wanted to check back in on something you said very early. You're talking about something you got from Malcolm X. You referenced religion. And religion, I think for someone like me, religion's like a ping word. Someone says religion, and my ears perk up, and I go,
I'm not so sure.
I'm not so sure.
You were doing fine until you mentioned that.
But then,
right.
Because we're so sensitive to language, but then you spoke more about an animistic paradigm, tree spirits, et cetera,
right.
et cetera. So is that your vision for spirituality in our world? And because I'm very skeptical, and I'm often very cynical about how Americans approach this syncretic New Age religion thing that we're doing.
Yeah.
It's astrology, it's essential oils, it's the
right.
supermarket of spirituality. And so how does that work without atrophying our critical capacity?
I see the critical skepticism, criticism, interpretation, hermeneutics, all of the kind of analytic stuff as a toolkit, that you should keep handy, but not live your life in terms of. That everything that takes apart, or you separate the etymologies of the different syllables in the word, all that pulling apart and analytic and divisioning, and what's the word for the live anatomy lesson where you take some live frog apart? Vivisection. That's the worst of it. It's torturing some creature to find out when does its heart stop beating or whatever. All of that is tools that specialists and professionals, doctors, people preparing to teach a certain kind of analysis in chemistry, or how do the molecules fit together. All of that is valuable work. I was just listening to something about Galileo on the radio last night, Brecht's play. Very good play for what science is about. All of that rationalism, science, specialties, comparing what different specialists say about the same object, et cetera, et cetera. It's all good. It's all what a university is about. But what's missing, I think, in almost everybody's lives is some sense of synthesis, pulling together, that this language of ours is growing, and it's growing more capable of just simply evoking feelings about being connected to each other. And so that supermarket of spirituality, where everything gets commodified into crystals, and buy this and you'll be more spiritual. Well, that's kind of what comes with the territory these days. Everything is being commodified or being uncommodified. And the beauty for me of us being musically relational, knowing some different parts of musicking and so on, is that musicking is the glue, is the putting it back together again, is a new synthesis each time we play, each time we improvise together, whether it's one person improvising or two or three or four. Get more in there, it can get chaotic, or it can just get over-organized. But that exploration is what makes the religion and the politics, reciprocal or mutual or collaborative, collaborans. Homo ludens collaborans. And that collaborans maybe should be the first concept, that we're the collaborating creature. We really know how to cooperate, and we can figure out how to cooperate and create Eden and Millerton that'll be different from Eden and Lakeville, and maybe even Salisbury can become Edenic. I'm giving you my Lakeville, Salisbury, division. To me, they're separate entities. I resent that the town hall is in Salisbury. You know what I mean? How'd they get the town hall? And the Scoville Library, the first library.
Is there any functional autonomy between Lakeville and Salisbury?
Well, yeah, there's the people who work at the lake, in terms of people being employed in different jobs. Salisbury Town Hall has some people who's, are on the payroll to make sure that the lake works right for people in the summertime. And there's a kind of an ethos or subculture of Lakeville people who are proud of being from Lakeville, or happy that they're in Lakeville rather than in snooty or somewhat Salisbury.
Okay. There's the dynamic.
Yeah, it's a class. It's a very subtle class
distinction
thing. Yeah. That Lakeville had the factory. Lakeville used to be Furnace Village. I'm calling it Furnace Village again. That's our roots. Is that my grandpa's factory that went bankrupt in 1926? Before the crash, it was down the tubes for the knife factory.
Did you hear German as a child?
Yep, my grandmother was speaking German to my dad sometimes, and I regret that I did not say to what did I know? I didn't know all the things I know now. If I had it to do over again, I would have just spoken German with my grandma, because I visited her most every day after school. She was on the way home from homeschool, and I would stop there, and she'd have something delicious cooked, curly pancakes, we called them, crepes, or kuchens of different kind, Pflaumenkuchen, plums in the middle of some pastry. Ooh, I can taste it as I as I think about it. And if I'd learned my German from her, I'd have this Frankenbesch Hessian German. When I identify myself to somebody, I try not to say German. I say Yankee Hessian, because they're from Hesse and they're farming people, and I love that. I love that the German part of me was agricultural and peasant and knew about the spirits in trees. So Eden can be there in Frankenbesch. Every locality, every village has this Edenic potential of autonomy, of energy and food, being plentiful. In Lakeville, I often think, we went and looked at the old factory. They got all this water coming out of the lake year round. It didn't always come out year round. I looked at my grandfather's journals from when he was a young man, and they had to close that factory in wintertime because the ice would block it up, or there wasn't enough water coming through the factory pond and down the hill to move all that leather binding the machinery together. And so they just close it down for January, February. And what did the workers do? I don't hear my grandpa worried about that. But in the dead of winter, all of a sudden you don't have a job, you're laid off for 2 months.
You decelerate.
How did that work?
You whittle down you live off the preserves.
Yeah.
From the fat times.
Yeah. And people all canned, or they did.
Now we want perfectly even all months of the year if we can.
Right. Not close to the seasons. Those seasons were crucial for everybody back in the day. So as I look at my little niche there in Lakeville, I plant trees every year. I just ordered a bunch of stamen wine saps, 4 of them.
What are those?
And I got them from the National Arbor Movement. I came across that, and they were offering apple trees for $15 each. I said, I'll just plant them along the property line there, and maybe they'll prosper and give me some fruit down the line.
Charlie Appleseed.
Yeah. Charlie seed. Every kind of seed I'm interested in to see whether it can grow here. And my big success this year is a French pumpkin called, what's it called? I've just learned how to pronounce it from a video yesterday.
A French pumpkin?
De Provence. It's from Provence.
De Provence.
And it's Musquee.
Musquee?
Musquee. Musquee. Musk pumpkin, or it's like a melon. I've got 5 of them out there. Maybe a 6th one hidden away. They're about this big around, great big green lobes that are going to have to get tan if you really want the best quality meat inside. And they're eaten raw. You make slices into this thing, a 20-pound pumpkin, and it's got all this bright orange meat that is sweet when it's raw. It doesn't have to be cooked.
So it's more like eating a melon?
Yeah, they say that the taste, I'm dying to taste it. I've picked one by accident, kind of. Norman picked it out because I guess the thing had gotten unhooked. Anyway, I'm waiting to see if that'll ripen up, get tan, brown, and I'm hoping that it's and it's a keeper. I'm really interested in apples that can keep 6 months, which the stamen wine saps can. If you can keep them cool in a refrigerator, they'll go for months. And the same thing for this Musquee de Provence. Am I pronouncing de Provence right?
Well, it would be de.
De.
Yeah, de Provence.
Ooh, look, he can talk that Frenchy talk. Yeah. Anyway, it's a great pumpkin, and I've got 5 of them. I got about 100 pounds worth of sweet orange meat if it all works out. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that there's going to be another 2 or 3 weeks for these things to ripen before the frost really hits them.
Mm-hmm.
Hoping. And I keep looking for things that woodchucks won't eat, that squirrels can't ravage, that rabbits and mice and chipmunks don't want. And it seems like arugula, kale, some of these, stronger tasting
Mm-hmm.
greens, you can plant those anywhere. And of course the tsuctras, what do we call them? Nettles.
Mm.
Nettles are all over the place here, around this part of Connecticut and New York.
Means you have good soil.
They're incredibly good as greens.
Yeah, they're superfood.
Mm-hmm.
You can make pesto and tea and
Right.
Nettle
Nettles.
tea is great.
It's all good. So I'm trying to figure out how to be a hunter-gatherer in my 2 acres there.
that's great.
If I can, increase the different kinds of pears, the different kinds of apples, not have to spray them, which old-fashioned apples will produce year after year after year. I don't know. You don't know until you try.
I read in a Michael Pollan book, I don't remember which one, that an apple from it's something like 1950s America or 1940s America
Mm-hmm.
had roughly, this is all paraphrasing, it could be
More
2 times.
nutrients.
Yeah, like 3 times as much iron as a modern apple.
Mm-hmm.
We're producing more. We're producing greater quantity of less nutritional content.
Yeah.
We're just diluting it.
Super farms out in California.
Like the
just
rose.
fertilized and
Like the rose is just losing its scent slowly.
genetics.
Right. Carnations have lost their. I can't find a smelly
Yeah.
cinnamon carnation anywhere.
I would hope that a Charlie backyard apple would still be a wild, nutritious apple. I'm guessing that Michael Pollan is talking about big
Industrial.
factory
The what?
produced apples. I'm guessing that your wild apples are still quite nutritious and beneficial, whereas
yeah.
I think Michael Pollan is probably talking about, big agribusiness apple
Mhm.
production and
Mhm.
how it's fertilized and monoculture and it's losing nutrients.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think your apples are still probably great.
I've got Golden
Nutritious.
Delicious that, none of these trees have been sprayed, not even with musk oil or whatever you call it. There's different ways you can do a kind of organic spraying program where everything is natural.
You
and
can use clay.
Yeah, you can mulch better, all kinds of things you can do to improve your apples and to combat particular funguses or blights or whatever. And I've been listening to that, learning a little bit about it, but I don't really have a local expert. And I would love to find somebody who can prune pears. I look at these pear trees and I say, they need pruning, but I don't know what, pears make all kinds of verticals and you have to pick one and I don't know I don't have it even in my hands or my eye-hand coordination. I look at the pear and I don't dare cut it. It surely knows what it's doing, So I'm hesitate to do that pruning of grapes, of anything. Pruning is a challenge.
They've been interacting with the hand of humans for
Right.
a long time. They don't even exist without us. A lot of those.
Yeah, and they need pruning, and grapes they'll just produce leaves if you don't cut them back each year. In Greece, they cut a grapevine back to just a couple of buds.
Wow.
Because they got 5 months of no water maybe on one of those Greek islands, and so they want just a little irrigation to carry it through to the grape, and that's going to give them intensity of flavor. It's going to give us fewer grapes but better grapes, and the way they think about that is just to be totally brutal with the clipping each year to get it back to. So you see these grape arbors with thick vine like that.
Wow.
For about 8 inches, and then it's boom, and then it's shoot, and then 2 or 3 things come off of it, and that's the vines.
Clever.
And those roots go way down so that they get whatever residual water from the winter rains is down there 2 meters deep, they're going to get it. They're going to hold it. This is a great, direction to go in terms of benign reality, because wherever you look in the world, even in areas of 10 inches of rainfall, and people making adaptations to that, how do we get vegetables to grow? What have we got locally that no other island has in the Aegean, or that we have most of or could have more of? And so they've gradually get more and more local greens onto the menu at the restaurants in this island that Angie and I go to whenever we can. And the food gets more and more interesting, more and more local, and people are realizing, ooh, we have a local pig here that is small and lean and full of bristles, and they don't have that pig on Seraphos. They don't have that pig on Amorgos. And so there's people who prize that pig, I think. I hope they're still there. And chickens. Chickens have been on that island. Sheep have long-tailed sheep that I never see anywhere else. I don't know how special the domestic and wildlife is on Sifnos, but Greece is full of diversity in flowers and in flora, not so much in animal life, but the position of that peninsula between Asia and Europe. It's gotten a lot of things over the years have drifted into Greece, and because they have so many mountains and so many different ecological niches, north to south and east to west, they have more variegated plant life than any country in Europe.
Wow. Really?
Even the fact that they've had an eco catastrophe. The first one was around 1100 BC.
What was that due to?
That was due to, I think, competing fleets and taking down too many trees for masts and building ships. And they gradually deforested their mountains way back when, around 1000 BC. And they had a dark ages before Hesiod and Homer.
That was
There was 4 centuries of really hard living that everybody looked at as the era of lead, or the era of, I don't know, they called it different names, but it was a genuine eco-catastrophe.
Cutting down trees is, I read a good chunk of Jared Diamond's Collapse.
Yeah.
About how societies collapse and ecological collapse. And it often begins with trees.
Right.
Over harvesting of trees.
Yep. No, deforestation is the same as desertification. Eventually you get deserts. And everything that's happening now with this COVID says don't get into the rainforests. Those last rainforests in Africa and in South America are the lungs of this planet. You get in there with monoculture of any kind, whether you're turning it into pasture to make hamburgers, or you're turning it into a Brazil nut plantation or whatever. Any plantation, any big farm is death for species, or it makes those bats that are the reservoirs of so many different COVID-type viruses. Bats because they're eating insects, or because they're eating a broad variety of fruits, fruit bats. There's over 1,000 varieties of bats, species, and they all have reservoirs of different viruses. Who knows which one of the next one is going to be worse than SARS or MERS or COVID? And every invasion of a rainforest is giving us new viral spillage from wild to domesticated animals, or vice versa. Wild birds come through and drop off viruses to domesticated ducks and geese and so on in ponds in China. Everywhere you look, these viruses are spilling over. And that's because they're being pushed together into limited habitat, or the plantation creates ideal conditions with no predators for certain kinds of bats. They used to be having to worry about who was climbing the tree to get at them when they're sleeping. You know what I mean? All those, you could multiply that example by thousands of instances of forced interfacing. So species are now confronting each other that didn't before because there was all that foliage and variety of other species in the way. The minute you simplify a rainforest, you're asking for big trouble, because those viruses are going to go from species to humans. And the more plentiful the species, us, more and more of us, less and less of the species variation, where are those viruses going to go? Hi, COVID. Who's coming next? You got cousins? You know, I mean, those viruses are adapting quicker than we can.
And we've shown that we're not ready to deal with it.
Yeah. And what do we do with the next one? I mean, I think capitalism is done as we've known it, and global travel is going to be very much more restricted. There's not going to be a bunch of airlines. We're moving toward local autonomy, local independence, it just makes more sense to live locally as fully as you can. And okay, we'd really like to have some oranges at Christmas time. They're going to cost you something to travel.
As they should.
Yep.
Yeah, as they should. And those things from other places. Now, sending lettuce from California to Connecticut, it takes more calories and energy than there are in the leaves, by a multiple of 20 or something, or 40. There's, the calories it takes to get that lettuce from there to here. It's ridiculous.
I agree with you that it makes this kind of decentralization, relocalization makes more sense. You're saying we're going in that direction. Can you sell me on that? Because I'm skeptical of that's where we're actually going.
Sure. No, I mean,
we should be going there.
Right. No, I mean, this is the reason to sit around this table and talk about everything that has to do, it gets encoded as climate change. That's the least of it. This is loss of species. Huge thing you cannot replace. Every one of those species took millions of years to differentiate itself over and over and over again on the tree of life, or as Quantum calls it, the tangled tree of life. That tree metaphor doesn't work anymore. These small critters, one-celled creatures and so on, it turns out they've been horizontally entering each other. These what do I know about science? These viruses enter into a cell and kind of cannibalize it, or make their way to the nucleus and change the nucleus of the cell, change evolution of the creature that they're in. We don't know the long-term effects of COVID. May be terrible or wonderful 5 centuries from now. Never mind 5,000 years from now. Because the time scales of these different life forms are so radically different that disrupting that balance, you don't know what the consequences are. So one of my pitches is not just for slow food. We should put that in here.
Yeah, I was just
slow food.
I'll put that in the outro.
And slowing up everything, if we possibly can, till we see what the consequences are of this plastic or of that invention. Or we got how many thousand chemicals, man-made chemicals, substituting for natural chemicals, or intervening in different ways, and all this.
And being dumped into waterways.
Yeah, it floats. Everything's going everywhere. It's not just the viruses. The polar bears may be sunk because of PCB poisoning that comes up the food chain. The PCBs are not very plentiful in small organisms, but they cluster. I hate to use the word cluster F, but you know what I mean. They get the PCBs change their nature as they get into grebes.
All sorts of things. Climb up mercury.
Yeah, mercury.
Microplastics.
Yep.
It's pretty hard to decontaminate once everything has just been distributed out.
I was imagining a dark future where the human organism over thousands of years needs plastic. I mean, it's very dark,
right.
But imagine that you need to get your daily recommended value of plastic for your circulatory system to work correctly
because it's adapted
in 10,000 years or something.
Yeah,
because it's adapt or die.
Yep. And the benign reality that I wanted to start with here, all of a sudden you begin to say, gee, Harvey Jackins could talk about that in the 20th century. And indeed, the sun rises every day and the universe is continuing to expand, and a lot of huge variables are not going to disappear, but we may disappear because our part of benign reality is shrinking fast. We're losing variety, we're losing species diversity, we're losing cultural diversity, we're losing.
Linguistic.
Wow, yeah.
I'm hung up on that. It's not as important as ecological diversity, but
You don't know. When I went to look up Harvey, after I sort of stumbled back into Harvey on this one thing that I gave to you guys, I went and looked up his Wikipedia entry and so on. And he has thought so clearly about this benign reality, making each person responsible for the universe or in charge of the universe. He said, if you think about it, our world, our individual worldview, our outlook, how we think about the galaxies, the life on Earth and its proliferation and diversity, each one of us has a different take. And it's a taking charge, a taking responsibility for the whole billions of years of life's evolution. Because most of those other life forms don't have a conscious take on that or an understanding scientifically or even the feeling for the diversity. They know they're part of the ocean or they're part of the coral reef or they're part of... We're looking at all of it, and then we've got telescopes looking out and microscopes looking down to the teeny tinies. We're the ones with the scope, the range of experience, the range of knowledge. And now's the question: is how are we going to enjoy this to the max? And a slogan I got from Angie: we don't all have to be here at the same time. There's this notion, that we got my cousins over here, this, we got extended family. If we only use it, we've got this, we've got that. And we need more of us because we got the right idea. Well, if every people on the planet, we need more Frenchmen. Do you? Do you really need more Frenchmen?
No offense to
more
the
Americans with a heavy carbon footprint. And you see governments make incentives to have more kids in France. The Greeks haven't been reproducing themselves at a rate that
Last I knew, France was the only country in Western Europe who was stable, who was maintaining its population, 2.1 children per woman.
Mm-hmm.
No one else.
And that's the reason that there was all this concern is that they're diminishing, and then we got all these immigrants coming in, Muslims from Morocco and Algeria and so on and so forth, people from our African colonies, on and on and on. It's wonderful, we all come to Gay Paris, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, we're overwhelmed. We're not the France that we were. They're not assimilating like they used to. They're now evolués are not evolving, and look at our soccer team is all black. What's going on here? And people get anxious about their very essence, their Eden, their eternity. Are we going to be all right here if we let all these people into our...
Europe's struggling mightily with that.
Yeah.
France is unable to sort through it because they have a de facto ban on even addressing these issues.
Yeah.
The belief in a neutral Frenchness. Like there are no racial statistics in France, for example.
Right.
Like intersectionality is a non-starter.
Because there's no sections. We're all French together.
We're just all,
aren't we?
We're all French, right?
Yeah.
But
right.
maybe I'm not going to hire Abdel for this position. We'll take Francois instead.
Right.
But we're all French.
Yeah, it's a fictive
Yeah.
unity. See, but they're also looking at the two facts that I think are really interesting about racism, and that is that we are, in fact, biologically, all one race. In fact, one.
Mm-hmm.
We all can intermarry and have been intermarrying for however many million years.
Mm-hmm.
We've been co-evolving. Once humans came, and that's fact too, we all came out of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd put those two facts together. If everybody said, well, science has told us, and I guess it's true that we're all one race and we're all out of Africa, so I guess we can all be Africans together. What's the problem? African, me, I mean, it's like we haven't begun to convince everybody that it's one race, one face, one destiny, one big village, one African dispersal. Those basic facts, it seems to me, would get us pulling together if we just spent time on that and then celebrated the cultural diversity that each individual, right? Johnny G puts together his Sunday evening program, and nobody else in the world can put that thing together. I get excited thinking about it. That one person can figure out a way to make 50 or 100 people happy and put tips in the jar. That's amazing. And that's the beginnings of a culture of Route 22. Make it true on Route 22.
Charlie's referring to my weekly gig at the local cider shack where I play cover songs for patrons.
Right.
I think there's a lot of people across the country in the world who do what I do.
Yep. And they all do it differently.
True.
Because they all have different, influences and different requests.
Yep.
Somebody doing this in Austin, Texas is going to have a whole different set of covers that need to be done of some local characters. I can do a version of so-and-so.
And you're doing it in a particular place. I mean, obviously, where you're from is always special to you, but we're from a place that's at a golden distance from New York City, which is a major driver, obviously, of culture and economics.
We're 2 hours north of the city for the listeners.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but we're in a purely rural setting. So, this is not Anytown, USA, exactly.
But
it isn't.
The particularity of one locality is also inundated with global consciousness in this day and age. And in the previous century or two or three, you'd be amazed at the cosmopolitanism that you can find in a tiny Greek village. There'll be some guy, like we had our friend Steve Salamone was in a little village, a fishing village that later has now become a big tourist place. Land has gone from, it's 100 times more expensive than it was just 50 years ago. Anyway, he's there up in Halkidiki Key in this little village. And there's one guy there who spent 4 years in Seattle between 1910 and 1914 and was part of the Key strike that won, key labor rights or something in Seattle. And he's there speaking his broken English in this little fishing village, telling Steve Salamone, who's, coming from a working class background in Buffalo, about how important unions were in Seattle, 50 years before when he was there. And it's as vivid in his mind in that little fishing village. It's more vivid than if he'd stayed on in the USA and had a life in here, because he's looking at that slice of life when he was young and hardworking and made enough money in a few years that he could come back to Greece and buy some land and, be a villager again. And there are lots of people in Greece who spent a time in the USA and went back and treasure that moment. And they were leading incredibly sophisticated lives here and back there, because they get the newspaper from Athens, they hear the radio. I mean, in this 20th century, 21st, you can have your village cake and global too. You can have as much knowledge of the planet as you want from any locality. And we're just discovering in this COVID situation that most people can work from home.
The world is
Many
flat.
people.
The world is flat. That was a book by, I think, Thomas Friedman. Just like you're saying, you can, from any town in the world with an internet connection.
Yeah. Now, whether that's a good thing, how much of your time you want to spend, but I believe it's within our capacity as humans, in a way that it's not for any other creature on the planet, to plan ahead, to think long term, way out.
I think it's an immense opportunity.
Yeah.
Because the sexiness of the city is undeniable, and we've crossed that more than half of the world population living in cities. You can see it here. In Europe, it's clear as day. Everyone's going to the city. There are no services in the countryside.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to go to the city, and it's a tough life there, and it's saturated, but everyone's still going. And it's a boom bust cycle. But I think that the internet is offering this fresh possibility to recolonize rural areas.
Right.
And yeah, we don't want to be glued to the screen all day, but it is offering something special to us. It's a unique opportunity that we have right now.
And this is where, if you could get, and I thought of this in Greece a lot, because the Zorna and Daouli trios, 2 Zornas and a Daouli, 2 double reed,
Whoa.
loud
What are we talking about?
Talking about music in northern Greece.
Okay.
Where gypsies, Romani people, have had this specialty for centuries of providing the music for weddings, saints' days, any big event. You want to have that double reed, 2 double reeds, making all these tartini tones, these overtones, buzz in your head. You get within 9-10 feet of 2 of these guys playing those horns, and you're getting a psychedelic experience that Grateful Dead people never have heard of. This is like buzzing harmonics and things come from one horn. When the guy knows what he's doing, he can generate that in your head. Tones that he doesn't hear, you're hearing real loud because of the angle that he's in, with some glass behind him, sitting at a table, with a bottle of ouzo and his horn. He can put some sounds in your head that you've never heard before, and that he's not actually hearing himself. He's hearing something else in his head. But you've got a craziness that this sound can give you, especially when you got a whacking drum, bass drum going with it. Steve Feld, my compatriot and colleague, said, I've got the best equipment. We're going to get the best recordings of 2 Zornas and a Daouli. And I said, I bet you don't, but let's see what happens. And of course, he couldn't. The 2 horns and a bass drum inside a room creates this reverberation that is like making things go crazy in the digital world. Sometimes I got lucky with an analog recordings, and the musicians in the village says, why didn't you take the recordings that you made in Cedar Castro, where he really had a great night? And I listened to those back, and boy, you had a quality. That was so good. Why didn't you put that in the CD? And I said, well, we thought we had the better equipment and the better, the most experienced recording person. And, it's all about luck, about the moment. And live music, improvised live music, is providing that for people, and nothing else can do that. People don't realize that or think that or feel that, I've got to get over here and hear Johnny. But there's some urgency to having a live improvised music synthesis in a tradition where it's worked in the past, and now it's going to work again in present time, and you'll remember it years later because that's the trio that played at my wedding, and that's the time I got so badly smashed on ouzo and had to be taken out on a stretcher. But before that, I remember this particular song. Oh, and the other thing about these 3 guys is that they can produce this music that can be heard in Slavic lyrics to that song, Vlach lyrics, or kind of Romanian dialect lyrics, Greek lyrics, Turkish lyrics. The same trios are all over Turkey. Gypsies playing the same exact music.
Maybe a little Ladino.
And Turks and Greeks don't, they're not, this is oil and water, they're not happily, peaceably together in their own minds, but they're sharing the same music. Amazing.
That's happening a lot in the world.
Right.
Where the supposed enemies are sharing a lot.
Yeah. Well, Serbs, Croats, and Bosnians. They're all eating the same yogurt. They're all sharing the same instruments and modes and Zorna and Dauli music in parts of Serbia and Croatia. Anyway, they're sharing a lot of stuff, including the language. And that's what makes Serbs so dangerous, is that they can't stand the idea that somebody speaking their lingo is a Muslim. We can't tolerate that. We've got to obliterate it. We want to kill them all. We could get rid of the Bosnians, then we could be happy. We have a tough time being with the Croatians, but they at least are Christians. They're Catholics and we're Orthodox. Whew, we have a lot of trouble, but at least we're not Bosnians. They're the same people with the same language, genetically, linguistically, and a lot of culture in common, but over that one religious difference. Religious differences, because that's the ultimate essence or values are in those religions. And that turns wonderful people. I used to be so in love with the Serbs because in Buffalo, they were the one people in the whole Western New York who, when their women were yipping and howling over the music and dancing, you'd say, wow, I'm in a Serbian village. This is happening in the mountains of Serbia. It's happening here in Buffalo. How can that be? How can they hold on to their culture so tenaciously that in your heart these folks might just as well be back in the homeland? All the other people coming to the folk festival at the Greek church, singing along with records or reading sheet music to revive their Russianness or their Lebanese-ness, or doing belly dance music instead of their sacred music because they don't have any sacred music anymore. They've been in America too long. You know what I mean? You see all different kinds and degrees of assimilation, and then all of a sudden these Serbs come out and they haven't changed their Serbian soul.
We have no sacred music. We've been in America too long. Oh no.
A thought to take away.
A thought.
How are we doing for time, guys?
I wish I could tell you. I didn't.
You didn't hit
somehow
the timer?
didn't hit the timer. So I think we're probably at about an hour.
Oh, I bet we're more than that.
Give or take, maybe more. Time flies.
Yeah.
Did you?
Well, we can figure out how to edit this into a radio program, or we can just keep talking and let it be in the Johnny G version of the universe.
Did you want to finish your poem?
No.
We did the first paragraph.
The Johnny G universe.
We'll pick it up again in the next unit for what I'd like to be a radio program. But this can also be we can anytime there's the three of us sitting at a table, this can go in three different directions. That's how I'm thinking of it. It's going to be useful to me to remind people of books that I've written, or be useful to somebody teaching a course in ethnomusicology or sociomusicology or whatever. And it can also be a longer conversation about anything that either one of you want to take as a theme or a title for a podcast. As I understand the podcasting, and I think this is something we might want to talk about a few minutes now, is that we don't know where the future of this is. This may become very valuable 100 years from now, not so valuable now. You know what I mean? The beauty of getting these things recorded, circulating, is that somebody in Greece can pick up what we were just talking about.
Digital artifacts.
Yeah. And they circulate. Or we're sitting here celebrating the local, Zach asking about what's different about Millerton when you come here. Do you see that locality emerging? I sure do. But it's also cosmopolitan, layered, I call it layered identity. I think everybody's layered at this point, and surely in Greece they're layered, because everybody has been in everybody else's business for millennia, not just centuries, millennia. Athens had a lot of people speaking all kinds of different languages, and Greek was a lingua franca, a lingua greca, kind of holding them together. But Diogenes came from Sinope. The different philosophers came from the coast, the Ionian coast of Anatolia, Turkey today. And there was no Greece back then. It was just city-states with different dialects and so on and so forth. Cultural diversity is just amazing, and it was there within language groups. All the Yoruba people that we now think of as one people, because they have now had a standardized language dictionary thing, they were all in different kingdoms. Oyo, Ibadan, Ilorin, Elisha, where the good Cuban groove comes from. That was one city with its own, king and advisors and so on and so forth. Little city-state civilizations with everybody doing a little farming and coming into the city for its excitement. But everybody in the city of Ibadan, not everybody, but traditionally, everybody had relatives who were more on the land outside that city than they were in the city. They come into the city for the market and then go back out and live 3 days, 4 days for cultivating stuff or doing their crafts.
Or you're coming into adulthood, so you move to the city.
Yeah.
And you come
and then
back.
you go back, and
yeah.
and that's why the villages of Greece are filled with old people. They've been in the city, they come back and kind of retire to the old home. And that's not good to not have your, kids and grandkids with you. And that's going to get rebalanced, I think, in any sustainable future. We're going to have rebalancing of extended family, rebalancing of everything that we have now classified into, economics, politics, religion, blah, blah, blah.
There's a major tension with individualism and multi-generation family.
Yeah.
Young people don't want to deal with the supposed inconvenience of living in a multi-generational household.
Yeah.
It's difficult for individualistically minded people to do that.
But it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be.
I mean,
but I see it. Like, I live in Spain and I see it in real time.
Yeah.
I don't know how it stacks up to Greece in the present day in terms of traditional family values, but I imagine it's somewhere along the same, somewhere in a similar paradigm. And there's a major tension there. A lot of people who grow up in traditional societies, young people, are itching
to get out,
to be able to close their door and lock it, and not have your aunts and your uncles dropping in.
Right.
And a lot of us who grew up in very individualistic societies are just starving for community or that feeling.
Yeah.
But it's hard for us to. Well, that's where I'm from.
Yeah.
Right. I grew up in a Puritan country in a lot of senses, with my nearest neighbor at 400 meters away from my house, or a quarter mile, or however you want to say that. And it's difficult to give yourself to community when that's not your operating system.
Right.
And vice versa.
No, I constantly see it in Greece, that what the Greeks call a pariah. A pariah is 3 to 15 people. Usually it's 5 or 6 people who meet frequently to eat together or to party at night.
In Spanish, that's a peña.
Yeah.
That's a peña.
Peña.
Yeah.
Is a little friendship group.
Yeah.
That's pretty tight.
It's a crew. It's a tight crew.
Yeah.
That's like they're your people.
Yeah. And these things used to meet in drugstores and talk books and talk this and that, or they'd meet in one particular restaurant where there was always a guitar handy, and you could sing cantatas instead of laika. Or you go to this restaurant and there's going to be somebody playing a bouzouki and there's a baglama that anybody can sit in and plink along with. There's this kind of collective singing phenomena, songs of the table. You can't eat and drink in Greece traditionally without having some singing going on after the meal or between courses or whatever.
Can you repeat the word for the crew in Greek?
Pareia.
Pareia.
P-A-R-E-A. How would you spell that, Angie? Pareia. P-A-R-E-A.
Pareia.
Pareia.
That's what we need in COVID times. Everyone needs a good pareia.
Yeah.
Your bubble.
Yep, the bubble.
Little bubble to be in and be social and intimate.
The 21st
and where people know
century,
each other and trust each other. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can trust so-and-so to always object to whatever I'm about to propose. You know what I mean? And it is funny. It is funny as it's so predictable.
Yep.
My brother-in-law, Angie's younger brother, who unfortunately has passed on, he was capable of walking into a taverna or a restaurant in his adopted village of Hortiatis. That's where his wife came from, and he living there. He was capable of arguing with two other tables and holding a conversation with us. I've got to talk to these people. And he sends some scathing insult.
Interject over here. And,
he just says, if I have to hear you even 20 feet away saying these stupid things that you're saying, I can't eat here. I won't be able to digest. Or, wow. and then this guy said, tough shit. A big curse comes back from this guy at the other table. But meanwhile, he's getting a fight on with somebody at a table 20 feet over there. Before you know it, Milt's up out of his chair and telling this one off and telling that one off. And when he's finished, there's not much left of those two tables. People sort of settle back down. It was Miltos. He just, had to cut these other people down to size before he could enjoy his meal with his family.
Awesome.
How's your Greek? How's your Greek?
Terrible.
Terrible? You got words, though.
I can make my needs known in almost any situation. And I'll always plead for somebody to tell me in English what's happening. And now there's so many Greeks that speak English.
That's a battle for English speakers worldwide.
But it is very important to have my little pidgin Greek. It pops up in my poems. It pops up all the time. Oh, the Greeks have a word for that, and we don't. And they have a curse for that they need in their world. And then some of their kind of curse words or slang put downs become absolutely essential. Just like MF in African American talk, for Ray Charles talking to David Ritz, he's going to use that MF word many, many, many times. Or equivalents, Mr. Franklin or Mammy Jammer or whatever. He's going to be saying those words. In Greece, Malaka has this one word.
Malaka.
You know
What's
that?
Malaka? It's just like a bastard. Malaka.
It means somebody has masturbated excessively and softened their brain.
Wow.
Really?
Well, the
Is that where
belief
that's
is
coming
that
from?
that's Malaka.
Malaka.
And you can walk along the street in Greece and hear some guy on a telephone. Every one of those little kiosks, the cubicle where they get the newspapers and stuff. There's a telephone. You pay your 6 pence or your 2 pennies or your drachma or whatever. You put down your money, you pick up the phone, and you make your call. This is before cell phones and so on. But it's still going on. It's fun to go to a periptero, this little thing, and pick up a phone and call somebody. And we were listening to this one guy, and he says, Malachias, meaning that thing, that phenomena, foolishness, soft-headedness. Malachias. Ray Malaka. Now he's talking to the guy. Yo, you sweet soft head. And so he held a conversation for a few minutes without ever using any other word. Malak, here's. And his moods were changing, and they were exchanging information. And all he was saying was Malacca different ways.
Amazing.
What?
Got to go to Greece.
It reminds,
She wants to go off to Greece.
I want to go too.
It reminds me of that episode of The Wire where there's two detectives investigating a murder scene, and the only word they say to each other is shit
Yeah.
for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Shit.
There was also, do you remember from high school that documentary about the F word and how
It's like every part of speech.
Yeah, how it can be used. It's such a diverse word. It can be used as an adjective, a verb, a noun. It was this funny thing we downloaded off like Napster back in the day.
There's this stand-up comedian. Maybe you've seen him. He does bits about swear words in English. And because he's foreign and has an accent, it's particularly funny because he's musing on like, where's the logic here? Like, what is dead ass?
Yeah.
Like,
my son came home he was 10 years old, and he says, I think my teacher is saying F it, frequently during the day. Is that possible, Mom? And she says, Gamoto? Yeah, that's what she says. Gamoto, over and over again. And when she's erasing the chalkboard and it doesn't erase right, she goes, Gamoto. She's just saying it a lot. Is that what she's saying? And she says, yes, she's saying the equivalent in the U.S. can't be said on the radio. You know what I mean? But a school teacher with 8, 9-year-olds can use it all day long.
Wow.
And that's because the verb to have, is also the root of groom. Gambros is the groom. Gamos is the wedding. Gamoto is screw it.
Yeah.
Right? And so the teacher's just saying screw it in a casual way. But you can also say, to the Holy Virgin, to your Gamoto Soisu, screw your entire kinship system. Your extended family is screwed, in my mind.
Some of the stuff they say in Spanish blew my mind. I couldn't conceive of saying something so vulgar in English.
Yeah.
Just like they poop, they shit on everything.
Me caga tu familia.
Everything. on the mother that birthed you.
Yeah,
Damn.
right.
It's brutality.
Yeah.
That's just savage. You said anything like that in English, people would become highly offended.
Right.
Very quickly.
Well, that's why Angie was very free with the F word in her prime. And I would say, Angie, this is not Greece. This is not.
Berta's like that. My fiance.
Yeah.
She's like my friend jokes that she talks like a trucker in English. So talking to me too much.
Right. Well, one person's terrible word, taboo word is another person's everyday. Well, it's part of our language. The groom, the wedding, the badum.
And the thing that happens after the wedding.
Yeah.
Well, one person's podcast is another person's radio show.
Right.
So there you go.
That's a good slogan. I'm looking for a slogan to come out of each one of these.
Well, this is benign reality today, I think.
You all recognize it.
Yep.
When we feel it, see it, hear it. And Harvey insists, where did I find that? In this is quotes from Harvey Jackins. Each person is completely in charge of the whole universe.
Whoa. Sounds like quantum mechanics.
And sunlight streamed through the gap. When they finally got to that principle, sunlight streamed through the gap. It turned out to be true, says Harvey, even though it seemed wildly improbable at the time we first said it. Each person is completely in charge of the whole universe.
It's a great place to end. We'll take it out there. Thanks for listening, folks, to On the Path with Dr. Keil. We'll be back soon.
Hey, don't call me for a prescription.
Enjoy being in charge of the whole universe.